Cheers, Ariel. We are back with another Pints with Air. 7-7, lucky number 7.
Oh.
July 7th. Man, some birthdays coming up here soon, it seems.
Yeah, good July. Deep summer.
Yeah, man. Got me on the 17th. Got you on the 19th.
19th, yeah.
Yeah. Some cancer babies.
Yeah, that's right.
That's cool. Yeah, I like having my birthday in the like warmest month of the year. Gives you a lot of options.
Yeah, this should be a good year. I'm planning to be out of town, so I'm gonna have a great week this year. It's many years over the summer. Often, just in my history at Ayre, oftentimes I'll be hectic times. I'll be working long hours sometimes, and even my birthday or holidays sometimes, but not this year.
Treat yourself.
I'm going to be off the grid this year.
Highly support that decision. We got a great team here now. It's not just us. We got a good team here, so we can keep things moving while you're away.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think they're just about ready.
Nice. Well, yeah, we're drinking a nice addition to our 30 with 30 for Avery. One that you had suggested.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorites. I love a brown ale. Avery's Ellies Brown is one of the best. There's only one brown ale that tops it, but it doesn't exist anymore. Actually, this pint glass which you can't read right now. It's from Stein Brewing, which was previously J. Wells, and the J. Wells brown ale was out of this world. But let's not divert too much from Avery's Ellies Brown Ale that we're drinking here, which is fantastic. So when you got this one a little super chilled, so when I poured this, it's a little slushy again.
I put it in the freezer, and it took us a little longer to get on camera than I expected. Yeah, I like it a lot when I was a young lad. Probably the first beer that I actually really started getting excited about and really kind of identified as my favorite at my youngest point when I was drinking. I'm not going to disclose that age, but it was Newcastle. Newcastle was one I was putting back a lot back in California before I discovered the wonderful world of Colorado microbrews.
Yeah,
moved up here. So yeah, definitely have a soft spot in my heart for a nice brown ale. But yeah, we got brown sugar maltiness, hints of vanilla and nuts. It's pretty solid. I'm a big fan of the Ellie's Brown now. In fact, we're gonna put Ellie in the background. And so when I picked it up, I learned that this was one of the original 3, I think, for Avery. One of the first 3.
Yeah, 2, 3, or 4. Yeah.
And named after Adam Avery's puppers, Ellie.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a year-round available brew, and one of the originals, one of the OG brews. So we had to give it a go today. So Ellie's Brown. Go pick one up. All right. Well, yeah, that's the delicious brew, and I think we can move on to talking about some Ayre Acoustics history here. So we're gonna dive into a really cool product, the D-1.
It's a big one. Yeah, so hopefully you can remember enough, because this was a huge step for Ayre. This, in a lot of ways, is what really put Ayre on the map. Your first foray into digital product, and certainly way more complicated than just a simple power amp or even not so simple preamp. But this was whole a whole new rash of complexities. Yeah, so and I was there from the beginning of this one. This was, I think, 96, I think is when we, was it, no, 99. I'm forgetting now when we actually released.
I just pulled up the air doc for it. So actually 23 July 1999 is when
we
initial
started shipping.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we worked on it for probably a year at least. So probably working on 98 or so. Yeah. So and part of the impetus was for this was, the beginning of the high resolution disc standards. And so coming with DVD and kind of the add-on to DVD, was the possibility for doing, at the time, 2496 high res tracks on a DVD. So that was the real kind of the real impetus for us doing this was not the fact that it was disc or even though it was CD, but it was for being able to do high res. Was the original goal of it all. And so we worked pretty closely with Classic Records when they were doing their DAD discs, which was a DVD standard, but using 2496 recorded tracks. So they had a whole collection of DAD. So I think probably digital audio discs or something. I forget what the acronym meant, but it's essentially DVD, but it was audio only. Anyway, so we had done, in preparation for some of it, we had done some prototype DACs. And so we had one or two transports that we had modified, or disc players that we had modified, just as kind of a concept. And so they were just CD at the time. And so we were just as a concept working on just the DAC time, because again, we'd never done digital before. This is our very first digital into digital. So any DACs, clocking, video, any of it. This is the start of our learning. And so we've done some like outboard DACs that we connected to a transport. And so and so we started playing with that, started learning about it. Just thought, unfortunately, at both of our prototypes, we had a break-in at the factory early on then, and those transports and DACs and a couple systems were actually stolen. So those were lost pretty early on, actually. But so we started working with Pioneer, and because they were able to they produced an off-the-shelf DVD player that had the features that allowed us to integrate them into our whole design philosophy. So part of the key to that was being able to inject our master clock into or onto their motherboard, their processor, so that we could synchronize clocks, essentially, so that our master clock could still sit next to with our DAC chip, which is what we decided early on is key to having good conversion. So we had to figure out how to, and so that required some rework of the Pioneer boards. So we used to have our clock, and we have a little coax cable that we custom attach from our board and solder onto, we would take some parts off of the Pioneer board and solder it on. So originally, the original D1 used the DV414 Pioneer player. And so so it, figuring out the whole clocking scheme, and that being very complicated by the fact that we needed to support 44 and 48K based sample rates. And so that means we had to switch clocks, but almost always a DVD player being more kind of video based, the video clock rate standard was 27 megahertz. And so that was their, like the crystal oscillator they used that we took off was 27 megahertz. And so we had to come up with a scheme, a PLL scheme, to be able to switch our clock and still both rates switching, be able to always generate 27 megahertz. So that was one of the hurdles we had to do. And then even then, and I think consequence of some of that PLL was that the phase alignment was not guaranteed. There was like three possible states that the player could power up into. And so if it powered up into, at first, we considered a wrong one, there's a timing alignment that would corrupt the data. So then we had to come up with a circuit to figure out what the alignment was, and then flip the polarity of something if it was in the bad alignment, so that we could reliably clock in data so that what didn't get corrupted. That was another big headache. There was, what else we do? But so you get it back up. So any of the audio circuit again was very much based on some of our prior work at that time. So I have actually the very first prototype of the actual D-1xe I have here. So you see, it was more the K3 size, and this was originally very similar to the K1. We were originally intending to be the D3, not even the D1. It's going to be a 3 series product, and so we had it in the shorter chassis with the outboard power supply. Again, the same power supply technology as the K3, K1. So outboard choke input power supply for the analog stage.
Right.
Unheard of for any kind of disc player, that's for sure. A two-box solution like this. Connecting with umbilical cord. Separate windings for the analog and for the digital sections. We had several windings in the transformer. Several to two even just for the analog, and a few more just for digital sections. I don't remember. Remember what's in here. Yeah, we have one big DAC board. I think this is the prototype. We actually even reused the K3 audio board in this one. Again, just as the first mock-up. Actually, that literally has a K3 audio board in it. Boy, it's a long time ago. Trying to remember all we went through more than 20 years ago now.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. We're doing this on kind of the anniversary month for it, at least too.
Yeah, for the release of it. Yeah, so we came up with, actually, our voltage regulation. We came up with a whole new voltage regulation scheme for the analog section, and actually some of the digital sections, the DAC sections in the D1s. We have a shunt regulation scheme, which is very good at the cost of current consumption and heat generation. But it's as far as sound quality and the output impedance, it's really good. If you're willing to deal with the heat. So that was new to any air circuitry. Our first foray into shunt regulation. Yeah, we use some of the now venerated Burr Brown digital filter plus DAC chips. So use four separate DAC chips, so one for each phase. That prototype, yeah. At least for the prototype. I think in first version, shoot, I can't even remember now what that made it to the first version of production or not. I think it did. Yeah, we used the PCM 1704s, and then one of the digital filter, external digital filters of it. And so the D1 never, after many years, it was not, it never got our MP technology. That still came quite a bit later, and so our MP, as far as the minimum phase and the customizable filters, would not have even been an option because we were not using FPGAs at that point, and so we were using the digital filter in this, which was selectable, so we still chose. And so even the D1 had the listen measure switch, and what that did was select either the steep or the slow roll off digital filter options of the Burr Brown digital filter chip.
I think it's really cool to see, as far back then, for a DVD player or transport, I guess I should say, there was so many options for it. Like, it looks like you could spec it as just the video transport, or
That's right.
do it with audio only, or audio and video, progressive scan option on there as well. And we had a hand, we were an early adopter of that technology too, right? Progressive scan. I mean, I think we were,
yeah. So we were certainly the first high-end company to do any kind of progressive scan, or even one of the early companies, period, to offer commercial progressive scan video. And so many people won't know what that means. So certainly, at that time, standard video was called interleaved, and so any TV screen or projector or anything, it would show every other line of video information, and then the next time through it would show every other line. So every scan would be showing half the information, and the next scan would show the other, filling in the other half of the line. So that's interleaved video.
Yeah.
And then progressive scan was essentially non-interleaved. So it would show every line, every scan, every frame. So it basically doubled the rate. And so that's what progressive scan was. And so so this is certainly also our first time working with video. And so the first option was just an analog video card, and it offered here. So we offered component video on BNCs, which was the official standard, as well as an S video output. Again, it was one of the standards at the time that you just don't see anymore. And then a few years later, a couple of years, we worked on we came out with the progressive scan option, and we worked with DVDO, which all became Silicon Image, to work on that. So we used their de-interlacer chip to handle the digital data, and we used a 14-bit analog devices DAC. I forget if that was designed for some satellite something or other. So we did our own DAC solution there, feeding our own video amplifiers. They're not discrete. It was a chip, but it was kind of similar to, in a way, similar to chips we use in like the AX7, CX7, or I believe they're essentially kind of diamond buffer type style chips that we could run without using feedback. And so we have zero feedback video amplifiers, not completely discrete, but zero feedback. That was pretty wild. And again, just unrivaled performance for the time. It was just way ahead of its time. We sold, especially with that progressive scan video, we sold so many of these in Japan, including to big manufacturers such as Mitsubishi. They bought several. They use the D1 as their reference in their video design laboratories and everything. And so like they loved us. They at one point we bought one of the last big CRTs that Mitsubishi made, and they sent one of their engineers out. We spent a week. He came out, delivered it, tweaked it, customized it, installed it, and he didn't speak any English. I spent nearly a week at our factory and installing this monster CRT in our sound room. It was amazing. So anyway, so yeah, so we were regarded as one of the best, video generators, video players of the time. So that was a big deal.
Oh, that's all amazing stuff. And we still have the archive page for the D1 up, so I was kind of going through that a little bit, and there was just total isolation between video and audio sections.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so that was, and I could tell some of the story about that, because because it wasn't, the original design wasn't that way, but and I forget, and this was, Gary Mulder was fairly instrumental in this too, and we used to go to shows, and we would bring like a big, like a 36 or 40-inch like CRT monitor with us, just one of them, which a couple £100. And so like some of those early trade shows, we would take this big monitor with us, and we would, show off the video and this and that. But at some point we realized that in certain situations, we think we noticed it first, even in the video quality, that something wasn't right sometimes. And so we did a bunch of experiments to narrow it down and isolate what the issue was. And if you had certain things plugged in at the same time, you could almost detect this weird artifact in the video. And then we would like unplug the audio connection to something, and then instantly it would just go away and be perfect. And that's when we really kind of realized the importance of that isolation between the audio and the video. And it also benefited the audio quality as well. I mean, it certainly went both ways. We certainly saw this, or you heard this, especially when we, with certain noisy video monitors. If you use like some kind of computer monitor or something, we hook it up, that generate a lot of its own noise, and particularly would put it on to, and presumably, more or less dirty up the ground. And we could certainly hear that in the audio sometimes. We even hear little buzzing or ticks and stuff happening in the audio. And then when we figure out how to galvanically isolate the ground from the audio system and the video system, all that went away, and both audio and video benefited, regardless of how you had it hooked up. You have anything hooked up, any combination, any quality, and it did not degrade from the other side. So that was a huge breakthrough.
Yeah, I can't think of any players at that time that would have went through that length to separate those. I mean, at that point, I mean, even the highest end players were still going to be a pretty integrated audio video kind of circuit almost. Yeah, that's super cool. The other thing that jumped out at me, maybe you can touch on, was the proprietary differential current to voltage converter for audio. Or is that something?
Well, yeah, so that's one I almost still don't understand, and even Charlie could never quite explain how he came up with it. I don't remember, but he said he wanted to try it. He's like, it probably won't work, but we tried it and it worked brilliantly. Well, it worked. And with no drawbacks that we could find, and it worked really. So, but even after we got working, like he still didn't quite understand it. And so again, I'm not going to give away too much. But essentially using this weird cross-coupled connection of our typical complementary differential JFET input stage, analog input stage, and yeah, I can't quite explain it. I can draw it in connection. It was like, why does that work? I really don't know. I wasn't, and I'm still not nearly as good as Charlie as far as that theoretical side, particularly with the JFETs. Charlie really understood, largely because of his physics major, like not just transistor, but like on that atomic level, he really understood those things quite a bit better. That's I'm a little bit ashamed to admit I'm not as strong, I think, in that regard. I'm much stronger in the practical side of using them, get them to work, troubleshooting, make them do what we want. But Charlie was another level of understanding semiconductors.
Really cool. Gosh, so many things that were thrown at this. It's kind of getting some gears turning though, because there's a little bit of a hole in our product lineup right now with regards to disc players that can handle this many formats. And
yeah, and and to be totally honest, part of the problem there is that what I would consider a donor player like the Pioneer or the couple models of Pioneers that we've used over years, and the Oppo, they are becoming so much more integrated, and that it's very difficult for a company like us to be able to access the points in the circuitry to do what we want to do. And so to back up again, like how we use the Pioneers, we would buy an off-the-shelf retail in the box Pioneer player, and they have some benefits because then any of the licenses for Dolby and any of that kind of stuff has already been paid for that player. We didn't have to do that because we, as Pioneers selling that retail, they've already paid for that, so we don't have to be a Dolby and or DVD Forum or DTS licensee, pay royalties and annual fees. So which is a big deal for especially for a company our size. We simply could not afford that at the time. So we would take that in the cardboard box, all the packaging, remotes, plastics, all that. We get all that, strip it all down, disassemble the chassis, and recycle most of it. So all that we kept was the transport mechanism. So see the prototype here. So just the mechanism with the drawer that ejects and the laser on the sled. That mechanism we keep, and then what we consider called the MPEG board. So the main decoder that basically that basically controlled the transport, sent information to this display, did all the decoding of the information from the disk, and then we only other piece we kept that we salvaged off of their display board is we would keep their VFD display, but we'd take it off of their board. We design our own display board with the buttons and LEDs that we wanted. We would actually, at first, I think we even salvaged their display chip, but then we found a source to buy the actual display driver chip. And so all we kept was the display glass. And then, so everything else in there, all the audio, all the power supply, The rest of the board was all ours. And so, you know, and one of the things we had to fight early on even was that there were some other companies that would take the exact same Pioneer product. And some of them would not even take the boards out of the chassis. They would keep the Pioneer metal chassis with all of its innards, put it inside their fancier metal box with cutouts for the output connectors. And that was it, and did very little else. They put the complete Pioneer unit just inside a fancier outside box, but changed nothing. And so there are plenty of customers that say, "Oh, Ayre's just doing that too." It's like, absolutely not. Not even close. We practically had to re-engineer the entire thing. So no, all of our own power supplies, all of our audio circuits are clocking, figuring out how to inject our clock into the Pioneer system. Dealing with the display. Yeah, there was a lot to it. And so we did not just rebox a Pioneer player. We just used the Pioneer transport and their MPEG board to get the decoded data. And then the rest was up to us. So then we, you know, made modifications to the MPEG board to be able to insert our clock. And very early, also, one of our goals was to make sure they were region free, so that it could be used in any country. And so in the early days, that required I would actually carefully remove a memory chip that contained the main firmware on the MPEG board, take that, carefully unsolder that part from the board, clean it, put it into a basically you know, a memory chip reader programmer, and then we either figured out we were working with somebody who was able to hack that code and be able to alter it. And so then we reprogram that memory chip, solder it back onto the MPEG board, and to be able to give it region-free capability. And that was with, at the time, I'm not sure, with uncertain legality, I would say. I think we're probably safe at this point, but you know, the volume that we did and so long ago, I'm not too worried about admitting that now. But yeah, but I pat myself on the back of that with that whole process, I did not damage or lose any memory chips or MPEG boards. It's at 100% success ratio on removing the part, cleaning it, reprogramming it, reinstalling it. Did not lose any, which I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's what prepared you for today's parts climate, so we don't have to chop your hands off or something. Oh, it's an amazing player. I mean, I think we're kind of still, I mean, maybe it's occurring a little longer than like what we experienced with MP3 or like mini disc or something, but I feel like with video streaming that we're still kind of in this period of novelty, in a sense, where we're really like enthralled with the convenience of streaming. But I think that there is still, you know, a need and a demand and a want for an actual physical media player for video. And just like my ears tell me for preferring CD over most streaming formats, I haven't sat down and streamed and watched a Blu-ray side by side or anything recently, but I'm pretty sure I'd appreciate the Blu-ray more than the streamed format.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and of course, it's, and when it was, even though it was stored digitally on a Blu-ray disc or a DVD, when you had, mostly analog system otherwise, so if you had, a really good analog projector or a really good CRT,
Mhm.
and then we had, progressive scan video, that video quality was pretty unrivaled. I know today's high res, higher and higher and higher res digital has gotten really good. And so we don't have a way to do a good side by side comparison anymore. But I would not be surprised if that progressive kind of video held its own against even today's highest res digital video systems. It was really special.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that like there's a lot of people coming back around to really appreciating just audio CD, and so I think that it's going to be kind of a similar thing with DVD and Blu-ray video eventually too. Is I think people will come around to kind of revisiting that and finding elements and differences between those formats. To kind of make them appreciate the disc-based media again. So I just I like that we're one of the few companies that pay attention to this medium anymore, really.
Yeah, so the thing I'll notice, so at some point in the life of the D1, Pioneer discontinued the 414 DB414. So we had to do a revision and design around a new player, which was the DB333. And so physically was radically different. So we had to design a completely new kind of motherboard interface system. And so there are definitely two different generations. And really, so our DAC board and the audio board remains the same. But we call it kind of the interface board was our name for it, I think. Had to radically change because even the mounting system changed quite a bit, where the transfer actually plugged into the interface board, so it changed quite a bit. So that was, and by the way, performance-wise, pretty similar. The main thing you noticed in the 333 was that the drawer opened and closed a lot faster than the 414 did. The 414 was pretty slow opening, it was pretty slow and lock, whereas the 333 was in and out really quick compared to the 414. But otherwise, the interface and everything else was not noticeably different. You're able to maintain quite a bit. And so Pioneer maintained support to us, and so they they were excellent to work with. We had a very good working relationship with their service department, and so we were able to get repair parts and repair documentation for a long time. Now today, that their support of those type of products has expired a long time ago, so they no longer have service parts for those, and so it's definitely more difficult for us to service them. I think we have some third-party sources for some parts now. I've been kind of surprised. D1s have not been a common service item we've seen the last few years that I have noticed. I haven't seen many in for service, so they're either chugging away or they've been abandoned. I won't speculate.
Yeah, I have not had a single one come in since I've been here. I mean, it's not been a phone call, no issues, not a service, nothing. I mean, Clay, I've been wanting to get Clay on our Pints with their episodes recently, and we just keep missing him. He's you know, he's got a bit of a different schedule than us. He's an early bird and gets in and gets out earlier. He's had some stuff going on, but I know he swears up and down this is his favorite disc player we've ever made, and he thinks it's probably the best sounding one in his opinion. But
yeah. I mean, there are certain parts of the analog section of this that, you know, are quite a bit different from our current circuitry. You have evolved away from some of this, and you know, some of our more modern circuitry is a bit more efficient. And this one was certainly a bit more power hungry and generate more heat. But there's definitely something special about this generation of circuitry. And so it is, you know, it's not something necessarily that we're going to go back to. But there's things to be learned from it for sure. And so it is fairly unique and it is special. Sure. Yeah, but again, you know, both, you know, that whole both the combination of digital audio and the video side, you know, being our first foray into it, and the fact that we, you know, honestly crushed it, really put us on the map. That you know, we were, you know, we just had this couple amps and preamps at the time, a really small company. We came out with this, and it doubled or tripled the size of the company, you know, rather quickly. It was that much of impact, that much of a hit. And so, you know, we were, you know, it was hard to keep up with demand on sales of this product for quite a while, which was fantastic.
And you know, the video game industry outsells the music and movie industry. Maybe we need to make ourselves like an R series gaming console or something.
Game itself. Well, yeah, I am aware of the size of the game industry, and so I do have some ideas for some products to address the gaming industries. That wasn't one of them, but
hey man, R series gaming console. I'd be all about it.
Gaming console. Yeah. If I would just something on the just something on the audio or video side, then yeah, the entire console.
Oh, dude, it would make me so happy actually, because one of my biggest complaints about computers or video game consoles or anything like that is the noise, like especially the fan noise, because it gets so hot. And like especially now, like the PlayStation, I haven't gotten a PlayStation 5 yet, but I know the PlayStation 4 sounds like a turbo jet fan trying to take off. And just, you know, just the fan noise in general is pretty obnoxious. It'd be cool to have a completely passive cooled,
right? Yeah,
system like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, in theory, you know, kind of like we did here, where we take that donor unit, we disassemble it, we keep the parts that we can't replicate, and then we replace everything that we're better at, all the audio section, the video section, the power supply section, the chassis. We can do all that.
Yep. There you go.
That's within the realm of possibilities, but
Ayre Acoustics Skunk Works project.
There you go.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, I love it. I love the fact that we make CD and have made DVD players in the past. I see value in that. I think that as time progresses and people start to you know, become more conscious of all the variables at play with a lot of these like streaming services and things like that, you know, they'll start to maybe come back around to the idea of physical media being kind of the dominant source again.
Yeah. I mean, if there's every, you know, again, you know, besides, you know, finding a donor player that has the right features and right connections to be able to, you know, extract the data we need and be able to insert the data we need to be able to, you know, be in sync with with the system. The other factors are, that it needs to be a pretty stable and, fairly, it can't be a, let's say, Pioneer or Oppo or Canon, whoever, Sony, it doesn't matter who it is, who makes the product. It needs to be a product that is going to be reliably produced for some minimum amount of time. If it's a player that's only going to be available for 6 months or a year, that's not really an acceptable donor player for us. We need, we need some minimum amount of time that we're going to be able to source the product, source that donor transport. We need to be able to have, some kind of, we need to be able to access service parts for them reliably. There are a lot of factors that go into, us being able to, reliably and, be able to consciously be able to produce a product like that. And we've been able to do that a couple times, but the current, the current market just is not. I haven't seen a good possibility right now. And now it's been a year or two since the last time that I've done a deep dive on what's currently available. And I will again soon, but
yeah, it's tricky for company. It's almost like two different worlds of technology in a sense, where like we really build our stuff to last and to stay in people's systems for 10, 20 years or more maybe. And a lot of these DVD players from the get-go are almost designed and built, to kind of be updated within a few years. So
or less.
Or less. So I mean, I can see how it's a challenge, it is, and it's a big financial undertaking to do an original kind of from the ground up solution.
There have been a couple companies that I'm aware of that have tried that and has financially ruined them. That doesn't go well.
Gotta play to your strengths.
From scratch, yes. With old DVD standards, dealing with spinning a disc, all of the licensing, the royalties, there's, so many facets to it that have to be considered. It is far from trivial.
Now I keep getting these ideas though. Now I'm picturing like the QX5, like a new player that has maybe a network input, a modular kind of network input, and gives you that disc and that streaming capability. That could be kind of a cool idea.
Awesome. Awesome.
Man, if only we had more free time. This thing's amazing. I know Clay's got a few of them over in his station too, because he just loves these so much. I was gonna try to take some photos of the power supply, but I think it's pretty similar to like what the K1 might have had at the time.
Very similar, yes.
Yeah, very similar. So I mean, people should be able to.
But you can see in that picture there where there are two D-sub umbilical power supply connections, and so again, that's part of the audio video isolation. So one connection is purely for the audio section, one connection is purely for the video section.
Dang, that's cool. That's super cool. Let's see. I mean, can't think of any other questions. I mean, this again is one of the many products that predates my time at Ayre, so this is kind of like story hour for me with Ariel, so I can learn all about it. Any other memories get jogged in this conversation you want to share?
Oh boy, I was probably too many for this. There are plenty of, I think it was when we were working on the progressive video stand. So I remember Charlie, I think he was a couple instances I know one where he was think he was in Japan at the Tokyo show. We had one of the prototypes of the progressive scan video, and so like he was experiencing certain issues, and so like I didn't even have, he had our only prototype at the time, and so like I would make some like firmware changes and somehow would send them to over, and he would install them and try it. Oh well, didn't fix it. It's quite, but it's doing this now. So I'd have to think about it. Okay, well that must be this. And so we went, middle of the night, through the night, because time difference and this and that. Like I remember spent days. Yeah, that was pretty sure that was the progressive scan project.
You're saying while he's in Japan?
While he was in Japan, in his hotel room, basically, testing out. Yeah, doing firmware iterations across the world. Yeah, that was not the most efficient, but at the time that was what was necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, and one of the another big story, because the Pioneer was it was known for, there was one bug in its video output, and so there was kind of a phase shift in one of the color channels, and so the color timing wasn't quite right. And so one of the big things we did in that progressive scan video option was to correct that, which was pretty novel at the time. So that was actually one of our first forays into digital filters. And so we would essentially upsample one of the color data streams, get more data points, and then we would pick a different data point to shift that data to get the chroma alignment more properly aligned, which was pretty wild. I don't think anybody else did that either. Yeah, because we had a, on that progressive scan video board, we had the big DVDO DNA relationship, but we also, was the first time we used I think a Xilinx FPGA originally specifically to try to do this color shift, to get the color timing alignment correct, which was pretty wild. So that was my first experience learning the VHDL language to be able to program FPGA. First time using it. We had a couple good outside mentors teach some key parts of how to accomplish that, and I credit them quite a bit. What else did that thing do? Yeah, that was a really big feature on the video side.
You think starting with a product this ambitious on the digital side contributed to kind of a quicker evolution on our digital understanding in general? You think it kind of pushed us forward a little faster?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we didn't just dabble in it. We really dove in. We learned a lot of things with hardware really fast, as far as clocking and reclocking and DLLs and matching impedances and transmission lines, signal traces. There was a lot involved. Even specing power supply bypass caps for the digital section. We had some of the early ones. We didn't give enough headroom for one particular gap, so we had several capacitor failures in one particular position because we did not quite provide enough headroom there. So yeah, we learned a lot of things very quickly.
It seems like it. Yeah. All right. Well, that's the D1, man. That's product number 5 for us.
Yeah, product number 5. Yeah, so it started as a D1, and so very similar to us when they're about D-1X and then D-1xe. We had various upgrades to it, primarily to power supply, power supply filtering and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the primary change we made. We did the X and the XE.
D1 and D-1xe. So yeah, I thought this would be fun to do for our next classic product rundown video, because it's been a couple weeks since we've done one of those. And next up is the V5.
V5 is number 6. That's right.
Yeah.
That yeah, I've got some really good stories on that one. That should have been a simple product, and surprisingly not so much.
Well, save it for next time. To be continued.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, I finished my Ellies Brown.
Yeah, long ago.
Quite a while. So I think that's a good sign. If you guys need a nice refreshing brown ale, Ellies Brown from Ayre.
Yeah.
But I think I'm educated on the D1 and the D-1xe for today. Thank you, Ariel, for sharing all your knowledge with me and all of our airheads out there. Well, cheers to you. Cheers to our friends for tuning in, and have a great weekend. And we'll see you next week with another episode. Until then, enjoy the music. Enjoy the beer.
Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers.